I explained a bit about myself. Let me give you a few ideas about how we work. So we have 3 different branches, let's say, what we are doing. The first is that we bring together ecosystem builders worldwide to discuss these topics, to get inspired by each other, to also give each other a feeling of importance. Because if you're an ecosystem builder, it might be that the venture capital firms, the investors, and the startups, they benefit from your work, but they might not recognize you as an equal part of the equation. That's the harsh truth. So sometimes it's helpful and nice to meet other ecosystem builders in the world and get like this recognition that you want. For example, we have our very good friend Peter Kovac that is running the Global Startup Awards, and I think that's also one very important part that Hungarian or Budapest has organized to give recognition to ecosystem builders. So I endorse completely these kind of activities, and the ecosystem conference goes in a similar direction. The Startup Heatmap Europe is what I explained to you before. We're mapping out startup hubs. We try to understand what made them strong, what helped them to grow, and how this could be replicated in other places. And finally, we want to create moonshot projects. These are initiatives for the ecosystem that help the ecosystem to reach the next level and to actually create innovation on a very cutting-edge level in the region. I explained a bit about my background. The track record of the founding team of Deep Ecosystems goes even a bit further. It starts from Startup Chile, Unternehmertum, Estonia, Portugal. So we even have like one of our head mentors has created an accelerator in Iran. So we really have seen many different places, and we hope we can pass that knowledge on to new ecosystems. Let me also start a bit with an icebreaker, because I think that it's good to look at some data, and I was asked also to compare Budapest and Hungary to other ecosystems. So let's get in the mood with a few questions and see what you guys know about the state of innovation and ecosystems in the world. First question, can you guess what the percentage of female entrepreneurs is in a city like Berlin? Startup entrepreneurs.
30.
20 here, 30? 40?
Or that 14 now.
50? Okay, 14? 16, okay. Do you think it's higher or lower in Hungary?
Lot lower. A lot lower.
Okay, good. So, first of all, surprise, it's 18%. 18% of entrepreneurs in Berlin are female. The European average is around 16%. 16%. Actually, Budapest has one of the highest share, which is around 23%.
Budapest or Hungary?
Budapest. So you see already, women are not so common in tech startups. Another question. You should know that. I'm sure you know. How much venture capital is raised in Budapest on average per year? We take the last 3 years as average. What do you say? Give me at least a scale. 200, 300 million? Someone guessing more? No, no one dares. The investor said 200, 300 million. So, okay, how much, do you have a feeling how much Berlin would have per year compared to 200, 300 billion in Budapest? 100 times. Yes. Okay, so 100 times more. So in the billions. 116 million was the 3-year average, the last 3 years, according to Deal Group. So of course they might not capture everything. It might be 200 million if you count that they might get 70% of the deals. So you're close. And in Berlin we are in the region of something like 5 to 8 billion. Good. Another question. this time London. You know accelerator programs. Techstars London might be one of the most successful accelerator programs in Europe. What is the percentage of startups that raise more than $100,000 after participating in an early stage program like Techstars London? What's the percentage? How much? 99%. Okay, that's optimistic. Okay, other guesses? 80? 67. What do you think is the ratio here in Budapest?
There's no Techstars in Budapest. There's no Techstars.
Okay, no Techstars in Budapest, but similar program.
Is there?
I don't know. You tell me. No? Okay. So in London, 33%. 33% of the startups participating in Techstars raise 100,000. And that's the highest that you get with any accelerator. That's the highest you get. Challenge me, yeah. Yes, challenge me. No, but accelerators have, of course, not a 100% success rate. So a lot of these startups don't go anywhere. And 33% is very high. It's every third startup that participates succeeds in fundraising. Now this doesn't count Techstars' own investment. So some Techstars program give 100,000 investment already. Yes.
Have you European average figure for accelerators?
Yeah, I need to remember. So most accelerators, we were talking about average and median, so most accelerators would be around 5%. Most accelerators have a success rate of 5% if you put that criteria. On the other side, not every accelerator is focusing on this. Yes, okay. But you can say it's fairly common that a startup would raise funding. So yeah, 5% of the startups that participate in most European accelerators raise funds afterwards. Yes. Good, so these were my questions, and now I come to the whole ecosystem topic. So there's this guy who is an asshole. He said, his name is Maxwell Wessel. He wrote an article that got a lot of attention. And he wrote, "Don't build your startup outside of Silicon Valley." He did an analysis of what happens if you start a company in Silicon Valley versus if you don't go there, if you do it somewhere else. And basically on every metric that he analyzed, it sucked.
Was it US specific?
Sorry?
Was it US specific?
I think he looked at US mainly. US mainly. So it takes longer to raise money. It decreases your odds of being bought. It decreases your odds of success in general. So if you started anywhere else, chances that you were successful much lower than in Silicon Valley. Now, this hopefully changed over time, and it's not so drastic anymore, but probably, in relative terms, being in a big hub makes a huge difference. Now, what do we make of that? First of all, it's not the air in that place, right? It's not the air that people breathe there that make them more successful. It seems to be that something is tied to locations that helps to repeatedly and continuously support startups to a level that they become successful. And that, what is tied to the location, seems to be the ecosystem. So this is what all of the practitioners and all of the theoretical papers that are written on this say. It is the ecosystem. A location has an ecosystem, and then it is able to produce success, or it doesn't have it, and then it doesn't support the success so well. Now, fantastic, but what is an ecosystem? What is success? Now, in Europe, we find only 8 cities that manage to reach regularly more than $1 billion in funding raised per year for their startups. No? So the cities don't raise funding, of course, but the startups raise funding. So cumulatively, only in 8 cities startups raise more than 1 billion in Europe. And that even includes Tel Aviv. Right, so 7, to be honest. So they have somehow created something that seems to produce startup success. They seem to have something that we could call a successful ecosystem. In the other places, that seems to be still lacking or nascent if we're optimistic. How did these guys do that? And what we observe is that it's a lot about creating a self-propelling ecosystem that produces innovation and support for innovation over time. And it starts with local ecosystem builders that are entrepreneurial and have a long-term commitment to build the ecosystem. They set out and say, I tie my career to the success of this ecosystem. I'm not like a government official, I'm not like a university professor, no. I'm an entrepreneur and I tie my own well-being and my own career to the success of this ecosystem. If I don't do this, if I'm not all in, if I leave after 2 years to become marketing specialist at what is next door, Microsoft SAP, well, I'm not building an ecosystem. An ecosystem takes 30 years to build. So either you're all in and you commit yourself and say, I want to build the ecosystem, or not. So we need these people. And we need them to learn from international role models. Many of the ecosystems were created by people that came back from the US, that saw how they did it in the US and said, I want something like this in Budapest, I want something like this in Berlin. These are veterans that saw it somewhere else, maybe even created their own company, and then said, my commitment now is to build the ecosystem in this place. So these people are very important, and they need to have the international role models because they don't learn it from home. They need to see it in a place where it worked. And they need to have continuity. They need to build a business model. So something that they can support themselves. Can't be only funding, must be also a business model. So this is how you build unicorn ecosystems. Now you ask me, is that really true? Or are you lying? Is that all just blah blah? Actually, I've seen a couple of people building ecosystems with that kind of commitment. On top, for example, we have Station F. Station F, the CEO is Roxanne Baser. She was actually a colleague of mine at Microsoft. She was doing the same thing I did at Microsoft Germany. She did that in France. And she was a journalist. She wrote a blog called Route Baguette, which was a startup blog on French startups. And at some point, she got that idea to build this incubator in Paris, which should be the largest incubator in the world. Now, if you build the largest in the world, you have this advantage that you get the attention of people that normally don't care about you. So what she managed was to find funding from Xavier Niel, who's a French tech billionaire, who invested 250 million into the incubator Station F. Brett Feld, he created Techstars. This guy was not always like, let's say, the biggest investor in the world. When he created Techstars, he was in Colorado, in a small town called Boulder, which was a small college town. Nothing about innovation there, nothing exciting, no VCs, barren land if you want. There's no corporates in Boulder, Colorado. The government didn't pay to build Techstars. So he said, I want to create a community of entrepreneurs here. And he was clever about it. He created a business model. He exported Techstars to other places and started to earn money with it. So first thing that they did was to build Techstars in 100 different cities in the US. Bringing to 100 cities the idea of Techstars. They didn't build Techstars in 100 cities, but they built a business model based on their Boulder model. So Brett Feld, another bottom-up ecosystem builder that became world-renowned for being an ecosystem builder. And finally down there, Unternehmertum was created. That's my former employer that is now the largest entrepreneurship center at a university in Europe, 400 employees. It was created by a PhD student. Helmut Schönenberger was a PhD student at the TUM. He went to Stanford and he saw they had an entrepreneurship center, and he came back and said, I like what they have there. I want to do this here as well. And he convinced the president of the university, and he convinced, very important, the heir of BMW to invest into this entrepreneurship center. Again, it's a bottom-up entrepreneur that says, I will invest my own livelihood into building that ecosystem. So the quality is a bit bad here. I don't know if there's a way to get this more visible. Shaking helps a bit, maybe. Good, so I have a bit of more time. Good. How do these ecosystems work? I mean, of course, there is a person that wants to build them, but what is really behind them? And one thing are these PayPal mafias, Skype mafias, etc. Those networks of people that start to get behind the ecosystem and start to invest their own money into new companies. So when you think of Elon Musk, for example, Elon Musk created a company that was bought by PayPal in the very early days, and then he became part of the board of PayPal and had equity, and when it was sold to eBay, he became a very, very rich person. But alone that wouldn't have made Elon Musk able to create SpaceX and whatnot. He would not be, just because he was rich, be the CEO of all of these companies. But he was embedded in a network that was behind a lot of innovations that wanted to position a very good CEO on top of these companies. So, of course, money helped, but also it is part of an ecosystem that produces very big companies continuously and repeatedly and puts the CEO, Elon Musk, on top of it, right? Do you know the Skype mafia? So which companies are part of the Skype mafia? Do you know in Europe what other companies came out of Skype? Oh, Skype? That was PayPal. Yeah, that was part of this. Yeah. Skype is, in Europe is basically the small equivalent, let's say. We created some companies out of the Skype exit. Europe's most notorious investors, maybe, Atomical Ventures, was created by one of these Skype founders. Other companies that you have maybe heard of? TransferWise, yes, true. Old? Far down the road, I think. They are Estonian, but were they Skype employees? I don't think so. Okay, Bolt maybe. Pipedrive, I think, is part of it. Yeah. Okay. So you know a bit about it. Diving deeper into this, a few case studies that I brought. First of all, I already shared this Munich. No? The guy who founded it, PhD student. The lady down here is the hero of BMW. She invested in it. In Germany now you have a lot of different centers that support entrepreneurship. The CDTM, my personal favorite, it's an elite university program for all the two biggest universities in Munich. Most of the unicorns come out of CDTM. Bits and Pretzels, a large conference, Barack Obama spoke there. SCE, Straschik Center, it's a very committed founder that invests a lot of time into educating entrepreneurs. Unternehmertum, Buy Startup, a business angel network, Plug and Play, international player, InsurTech Focus, one of the most successful programs of Plug and Play. So Munich has really made headways, and if you look here at the graph, you see that Munich was maybe at a similar stage like you are, until 2017. Very far from the 1 billion. There's the 1 billion, very far from it. And at some point, something happened and things are exploding. And like with a startup, ecosystems have hockey stick growth. At some point, it goes through the roof. And in many, many, many places in Europe, you see a similar jump. Year 2018, the first time close to the billion. 2019, over 1 billion. 2020, again over 1 billion. 2021, 4 point something billion in Munich alone. So this is exciting for me, especially. I started my career there. I would have never thought. When I started, people said, startups in Munich doesn't make sense. People go to Berlin, forget it. No? So now I look back at this. When I started, we were no man's land. No one was thinking of Munich. No? It was not a brand that you go out and say Munich has a great startup ecosystem. Not at all. It was maybe depressing, no? But then suddenly something happened. Good. Another place, another example, Odense in Denmark. Odense is a very small place in Denmark. It's not even the capital, but they have something no one else has, which is a functioning ecosystem in robotics. Odense is the only place in Europe that outperforms London every year in terms of investments in robotics. And why do I say that? Because it's significant. Basically no vertical. London is always on top in every vertical in Europe. You can look into whatever vertical. London will always be the place that has most investments in each vertical, except robotics. In robotics, you have Odense.
The whole economical ecosystem is actually built upon that model. Every university has a robotics course.
In Odense, you know Odense?
Yeah, I studied.
Fantastic! You see how small the world is. So you have already your future head of robotics, the robotics cluster in Budapest. Very good. Good. So how do you like it there?
It's actually pretty good. It's pretty nice. It's called
Very good.
very entrepreneurial. So it's like mostly startups making up the economy there.
Mm-hmm.
In tech.
Yes, it's an impressive place. You know the latest cluster that they're developing now? Cannabis. I'm not kidding you. So the same cluster organization that runs the robotics cluster is investing in the cannabis cluster now, and they want to replicate it in another sector.
I can understand that.
Yes, so Odense is a fantastic place. How did it all start? It started with a company that was very successful called Universal Robots, and that was sold. It was an exit. The company was sold for hundreds of millions, and the money was not spent on a yacht to travel the Mediterranean, but it was spent on new startups. It was spent on creating a cluster organization that supports innovation and entrepreneurship in Odense. And what came out, more and more startups in the robotics space over the time. So from 2015 to 2020 it exploded, and you have like a lot of new robotic startups there. And now an example that we all know and we all look up to and say, oh, if we were good as Cambridge, if we made it to the level of Cambridge. But of course they are unreachable, they are just so advanced and everything. We can never have a university spin-out ecosystem like Cambridge. But then you must look at, so 23 unicorns, you see all the numbers here, what they do. But then you realize this didn't start so long ago. Basically in Cambridge in the 2000s, you had the first time a significant number of spin-outs. So they did start on a high level always, but there was certain institutional settings that needed to be put into place so that innovations created at Cambridge could be spun out and turned into 23 unicorns. And that had to do with some changes in legislation, the ownership of IP, that went from the professor to the university. The university had a say in the IP usage, and they basically decided to create startups from IP, and professors that wanted to just sit on there and not do anything with it were not always the ones that are deciding. So there was basically support for PhD students, for postdocs that wanted to create companies with that IP. And that was made possible. On the other side, you had a lot of difficulties with that because the deals were horrendously bad. And still today you have startups complaining, spinning out of Cambridge of the bad deals because the university wants to have a lot of equity for their IP, which sometimes leads to a problem with investors who say, I'm not investing in a company where the university owns 50% of the equity, right? Still exists. But they have a team that works on these problems and they kind of try to fix it. They also have investment opportunities there, and they have a relatively transparent way of supporting spin-outs. Now, today they managed it, so it's working. They have a very high amount, and this shows that you, even if you are now at zero, can, in 20, 30 years be at such a level. Is that scary? Is that 30 years, of course, a big commitment? Yes, it is. No, but on the other side, if no one does that, we're not getting nowhere. So, where are we today in Hungary? Looking at general rankings of the entrepreneurship scene in Hungary, we must see that Hungary is not very relevant in the startup world. There's a few rankings, you can debate them, you can say the methods are bad or whatever, but in principle all rankings show the same direction. Startup Link, number 51 in the world. CB Insights is not even listing it. Startup Genome, with the Startup Ecosystem report, they listed you in the top 15 most affordable talent, which is a sub-index of a sub-index. And I think you paid for it. You didn't pay us, but you're number 31 on the Startup Peak map. So, this is of course not a great situation. And if we look closer, as I showed you before, we see some growth in funding over the time in Hungary. Last year, 2022, we are at something 200 million, 190 million something in funding, the best year since the recording year. That's great. But if we look at, then we look also what are the topics that people are discussing here. The biggest topic that is discussed among startups here is actually gaming. No? So it gets the most, let's say, attention on social media, startups with gaming. A bit health and biotech, a bit AI and data, a bit female, a bit cybersecurity. And let's compare this with a place like Vienna. What is it, 250 kilometers from here? It seems they didn't sleep in the year 2020, because then they went from also very little to 1.4 billion in investment. And if you see what they are discussing, is a lot more fintech, a lot more health and biotech, AI data, IoT. It's a bit of a different setup, you know? It's not that they are galaxies away, now yes in the last years, but if you look back here, it's not galaxies. But it's something is different, something is working different. And if we compare on more categories, and you can look this up on startupheatmap.eu, you can see all of this analysis. I know it's a bit hard to read because of the projector, but basically here we look at different categories of ecosystem health data points, so different indicators, what's happening here, and we see that that Hungary is actually performing very bad on brand visibility, on attraction of foreign founders. It's a bit better on expansion destinations, so startups expanding here. It's actually ranked number 20 in Europe, so a bit better than this. Developer availability is so-so. Investment rates very low. Investment growth, number 40 in Europe. So 39 hubs are growing faster than Budapest. Job creation very low. So there's a couple of problems in the ecosystem. However, there's also potential. So there was some talk about creating 8 unicorns by 2030 in Budapest. Well, that's some big hopes. Let's say you would want to get there, you would want to manage to do that. What would you need? If you compare what others have, what would Budapest need to get to that level? And looking at various different elements that I just showed, startup support, 5 times better startup support. Because if you, for example, compare Vienna's accelerators, and you would get to the follow-on funding rates of the accelerators in Vienna, in Budapest, and you would increase that 5 times, you have a chance. No? So basically Vienna is 5 times better than you in startup support. International founders, comparing Budapest, for example, with Lisbon, Budapest is very attractive with students going on Erasmus, etc. A lot of people come here to study and spend their summer semester. But you don't get entrepreneurs that come here and say, I want to start my business here, I want to be a digital nomad in Budapest. If you were as good as Lisbon in attracting international founders, you could be 8.5 times better, attracting 8.5 times more international founders. So you would have to learn from Lisbon. Specialization. We see that one of the best sectors you have in investments is cybersecurity. It's a good sector, there's something happening here in cybersecurity. And if you would learn from Tallinn how to build up a really good cybersecurity hub, you could potentially get to the level of Tallinn, which has 200 million invested in cybersecurity startups per year. So if you only build up that one sector, like Tallinn, 200 million would be possible. From Dublin, you could learn how to attract global tech firms. Dublin has 4 times more global tech firms coming to Ireland to set up offices. And that means talent, management, knowledge, people that can join startups, make them grow, have experience for international markets. These people are not here at the moment. So in Dublin, they have that talent pool. And from Lausanne, finally, you could learn how to support university startups better. Lausanne, a small place in Switzerland, has 3 times better support for university startups. Now, I didn't pick Berlin, I didn't pick San Francisco. I picked places that are not galaxies away from who you could learn, because they also come from nothing. They also created ecosystems from a very low level. So there is a path that can be followed, that can be studied, and can be implemented here. Now I think that is very exciting, and there is potential here. Now you have 2 ways of building ecosystems, and I think that's one trap that we need to avoid. One is the shallow way of building ecosystems. The shallow way centralizes ecosystem management at the government side, basically builds on vanity metrics, trying to look good, trying to tell the world we're already great. It has international experts come in, do some workshops and go away again. They do things like, oh, we create unicorns by 2030, 8 unicorns or whatever. These kind of things happen in shallow ecosystems. It's all about show, it's about we do, don't worry, we do. Versus building deep ecosystems, what we want to do, which are things that work with entrepreneurs from the bottom up, that create symbiosis of several ecosystem builders, let them work together, create holistic ecosystem analysis, build local talent that wants to create the ecosystem, invest in structures that support hundreds of startups continuously, and focus on sustainable impact. So that is what we suggest, is to focus on deep ecosystems rather than shallow ecosystems. And actually, we have that idea with Imre and with some others that I'm very grateful that they embark on this journey with us, that we want to create more ecosystem builders, more ecosystem here in Hungary. So if you're interested, we have an idea for a journey. We have a plan how you can join deep ecosystems with international ecosystem builders, not only from here, but from everywhere, to learn how it is done and to build something that you can make your own living with and you can invest yourself to become an ecosystem builder. We should start all with a conference, several conferences, like today, the Ecosystem Festival. In November we had an event before, I was already there. We have another event in April coming up, and we have already put our eye on June for bringing the international ecosystem builder community here to Budapest, so that you can meet the others who are doing these things in other places, get inspired, learn from them, and after June, formulate your own ideas for creating the ecosystem and join our 6-week accelerator for ecosystems. And in these 6 weeks, ecosystem builders from Hungary will build their own ecosystem initiatives and learn how to build a business model around their ecosystem. So, my invitation to you is to to come to speak to Imre, me, and Nora as well, and say, I want to invest myself in building the ecosystem here. What are the next steps?